Hello there, and welcome back to Jennie Designs with Paper. Thank you so much for stopping by my channel today. I'm working in my art journal, so get comfy and let's get crafty. This is the September 2022 mood board for the Artsytrio Facebook group. It's very groovy, very 70s, very kind of, I don't know, retro, and there's a lot of elements here. So I kind of ran with a little bit of everything. So I have printed out my mood board, and I also printed out some sheet music onto some rice paper. I selected some acrylic paints that are in the color family of the 70s. I have a stencil and some matte medium, some gel medium. The papers that I printed were a little smaller than my art journal page, so instead of just lay it down flat, which that's boring, so who wants to do that anyway, I have trimmed them down to be little, and I think they ended up being like 2 by 3 inch rectangles, and I'm going to kind of put them on the page. I'm not going to say willy-nilly because I definitely had an semi-plan in place, but they're definitely not exactly lined up, right? Some are sideways, some are upside down even. But yeah, so I'm just going to go ahead and adhere this rice paper down to my art journal page with my Liquitex matte gel medium. I'm using this one because it was on my desk. I mean, I could have used like a liquid medium, but whatever, it was on my desk. So once I have that all adhered down, I am going to go ahead and heat set that with my heat gun, and then I will trim that off screen and be ready to move on to the next part. So the next thing I want to do is push back this music paper with a little bit of white gesso. So gesso looks like it's going on more opaque than it actually ends up being. I am still adding a little bit of water to kind of thin out the gesso a little bit more. Also, I started with a wet brush, which I'm not sure why I did that. Usually I wet the brush down first. But anyway, once the gesso is on the art journal page, I can dry that off, and it will push the music paper to the background without covering it up completely. It's not going to be the most visual part of the art journal page for sure, but it's there. It's in the background. So my next plan is to take this color palette from the mood board and this stencil. This is a mod circle stencil, and I think it's from scrapbook.com. And I am just using some pieces of art sponge rather, and I'm kind of sort of going for a rainbow-ish pattern with this stencil. I'm definitely not going in straight lines. I'm not going even in equal amounts of each color, but I am just kind of making sure that the colors I lay down next to each other work together well. So like I went from the blue into the green, I'll go in from the green into the yellow into the orange, orange into the red, and kind of back again. I did choose to use some blue and red. Red because my focal image has red in it, and blue because it's kind of not exactly the opposite of red, but the red will pop next to it nicely. So I've definitely got some 70s vibes going on with this color palette here. It's kind of throwback to my grandma's house when I was a little kid. She had the harvest gold shag carpet and a green fridge at one point, I think even. I did need to clean off my stencil and reposition it because it is slightly smaller than my art journal page. I do not want to put the green next to the red because that makes brown, or makes mud. So I did add another layer of blue in there and another layer of that kind of avocado olivey green. And then it's very 70, right? It's got the color palette, it's got the rainbow-ish theme going on. Those mod circles are kind of nice, but I wanted to also push that back just a tad. So I wiped the stencil off and pulled it out, or laid it back down again. And this time I'm using some gray archival ink, but I'm offsetting that stencil. So I'm putting that little star in the middle, kind of in the center between where the circles would overlap. And that's going to kind of sort of push that rainbow, like kind of wallpaper look back to the background a little bit. Not like if I were to go over it with gesso, but it definitely subdues it. I mean, let's face it, the 70s were a little bit extra, and so anything done in a 70s palette is going to be a little extra. Not that the 2020s weren't extra, but okay. So here are my focal images. I have found this vintage pinup doll or pinup girl kind of image, and I drew John Lennon style glasses on her. I've also printed out a drum set and a guitar, and I've trimmed those out already off camera, and I'm just inking up the edge with whatever that gray ink is in my blending tool, just to kind of keep the edges, that raw paper edge, that white edge, from standing out, because it definitely would stand out against this background. This is just a girl, an image I found, a woman image I found online. I just did a Google search for like a 1970s vintage pinup girl. I made sure I had a common, what's the word, common use. I didn't want to pick something that's, that somebody had a copyright on. And I'm going to go ahead and position her on the art journal page like she's sitting on this drum set. So this is kind of where that music idea comes into play. The top right-hand corner of our mood board is a picture of, I can't remember if it's the Beatles or the Monkees. Now that I'm thinking about it, it's got a music group up there. I don't even have it on my desk to look at because I put it over behind me to dry. That's just craziness. Anyway, so I have her positioned on top of those drums, and I have that music paper to kind of pull in the music element of our mood board. And the reason I drew John Lennon style glasses on her was because the quote I stumbled upon was from John Lennon, and it's one that I have always liked. And it says, "Life is what happens while you are busy making other plans." Now, I just printed that out on printer paper. It did, the ink wasn't quite dry enough because I printed them today right before I started putting it together, as opposed to printing them yesterday and letting them dry. So I did need to go back in and fill in a couple of letters, especially in that other word. So once I had that dried with my heat tool, I pulled out a Zig marker, and I did make sure that all of that gel medium was dry, because that gel medium will gum up the nib on your pen and it won't write anymore. But now you can't even tell that it ran away, or that it washed away. Ran away, washed away. Oh my goodness. Okay, so my next step is to add some shadowing, and I have pulled out some watercolor pencils. I have a gray and a brown and a black, and I'm just kind of going back and forth between the three to give the best shadow that I can get on the image I'm working on. Like, I want to put a shadow underneath the woman who's sitting on top of the drums. I want to put a shadow around the edge of the woman to pull her off of the background. I want to put a shadow around the guitar because it's leaning on the front of the woman's legs and it's leaning against the drums. But also I went in the actual image of the woman and I deepened the shadows, like where her dress lays on her legs and where one leg and one foot lays on the other leg and foot. I deepened the shadows around her face because it felt like up against that yellow and green, it was kind of her face and neck area kind of blended in just a little bit too much. I wanted to make sure that there was still some emphasis there. And also, this is an image that I printed off on my inkjet printer. I mean, it's not like it's a great quality image, right? I did go ahead and add some shadowing around her arm and her little shawl or scarf that she's got wrapped around her shoulders. And in her one hand, she's holding a flower. And in the image, when I found it, it was a very yellow flower, but it didn't print yellow. So I added some red to it to just kind of pull it off the color of her skin, because it was starting to blend just a little too much. Okay, so now I've added the holes to the front of my art journal page, and I've pulled out this kind of rust-colored polka dot pattern paper. And I'm going to adhere that to the back of my art journal page just to kind of cover up that the mess that is back there. It's not as messy this time. It didn't get quite as dirty as it does sometimes. I'm just going to go ahead and tape that down with my double-sided ATG gun, and then I'll trim it down with my Fiskars paper trimmer. I did intentionally put it up off the edge because I wanted to make sure that the edges got good and adhered, but also there's a couple of edges that aren't quite straight from where I had adhered that rice paper, the music sheet rice paper down. So this gave me the opportunity to kind of straighten out those edges and make sure that they were not going to peel apart or look wonky, because that would bother me. Wouldn't bother anybody else, but it'd bother me. Okay, so here is my art journal page. I'm going to go ahead and punch the holes through the back sheet now. And then I'm going to adhere the mood board card to the back of the page. So I've got the color palette in there. I chose a woman in a dress because there are 3 different dresses on this mood board. I went with the music because there is that music group at the top. I think it's the Beatles. And I did pick a quote that is somewhat well known. The quote on the mood board is from Martin Luther King Jr. I went with John Lennon because music. So here's a close-up of my lady with her John Lennon glasses sitting on the drums. I hope you enjoyed the art journal page today. I have added a couple of other videos here for you to watch, as well as a subscribe button. If you have not already subscribed to my channel, I would love it if you did. Leave me a comment, leave me a thumbs up, and I hope you have a really great day.